thank everyone for coming. I think the attendance here and our online attendance speaks bounds to the thing that Springfield College does best, which is community. Right? The fact that we put out a program saying how can we support students, how can we support folks of different identities, and this is who showed up is really inspiring. So I hope that this is a productive session. Today we're going to be talking about transgender and gender non-conforming students. We're going to dive into a couple of different policy pieces that you need to be aware of as employees, as community members, and not just what those policies mean, but how you can effectuate them in your area and in your department. Again, touching on community, one of our objectives is to talk about what we can do better and how you can help make our response and support better as a community. So today we're going to be hoping, right, some of our objectives are to empower our faculty and staff, right, to empower the employees of Springfield College, hoping to help you feel like you have ownership over institutional policies. The gender-based misconduct policy, for example, is about 50 some odd pages. It's overwhelming. It's my full-time job. But you as an employee of the college should feel that you know how to navigate that in order to help and support students, peers, and fellow employees. I'm hoping to educate you a little bit more about your responsibilities relative to Title IX as it applies specifically to non-binary and gender non-conforming students. We're going to talk about some of your best practices and hopefully share in some community discussions as far as those gold standard practices for supporting students, whether it's in classroom settings, programmatic settings, or other interactions. And then finally, like I said, part of our objective today is to really celebrate the values of Springfield College and what it means as we kind of take on this field of support. So if you've come to a Title IX presentation of mine before, you know that I always reference the Springfield College mission. Right? That's not unique, that's not new. Anyone who goes to Springfield College, who works at Springfield College knows what? Spirit, mind, body, right? We love it. And the thing that attracted me most, and I will say this always, when I applied for the job at Springfield College, specifically a Title IX job, is that an institution whose commitment is educating the whole person. Sounds like Title IX to me. Right? For those of you who are unfamiliar, the object of Title IX is to remove institutional barriers. That means anything that prevents a student or person from accessing their learning space. That means if your safety is compromised, you can't access your learning space, right? If you feel that you're being judged, or if you're in harm's way, or you're concerned, or you're lacking confidence, right? These are all different ranges and scales of barriers. But when we talk about transgender students, gender nonconforming, and non-binary students, this becomes particularly relevant. Because in our commitment to our mission to educate the whole person, spirit, mind, and body, what that really translates to is affirmation. Right, that we accept and support our students, our peers, fellow employees, as they are in their entirety. Right, so when we're talking about our mission, again, I can't help but think, yeah, that's Title IX, I'm exactly in the right place. So I always like to talk about our mission when we talk about Title IX. Today's program, I want to identify some guiding assumptions. First, transgender and non-binary students are enrolled at Springfield College. This is not relative to in the future, maybe someday. We're not talking about this discussion as if this is a historical accurate, right? That, oh, one time we had a non-binary student and now they have gone and we are done, right? Nope. We are functioning under the assumption that we have transgender and gender non-conforming, non-binary students that navigate these spaces, that we have employees that navigate our spaces, and that they are here now. Second, not all transgender students in particular are able to live with these identities being visible. And we'll unpack that a lot more. By that I mean, students may have these identities, they may hold them internally, but for various reasons, whether it's their socioeconomic status, religious beliefs, right, whether it's their dynamic within their family, may not be able to share those externally. So we're gonna unpack what that means a lot more and how that affects you with your interaction with them. The next is that transgender students have concerns that are unique from other identities. So today, we're going to be focusing our program on transgender and gender nonconforming students in a way that's unique and different from other members of the LGBT community. So that's not to say those conversations won't be had, and it's not to say at all that those conversations are not outstandingly important. But today's type of allyship that we're talking about is how when we interface with students who do not fall in a gender binary, our institution and our social structures can cause them harm or make it more difficult for them to navigate some challenges, right? So that's today's topic. We'll talk about allyship in lots of different ways, but that's the focus of today. So again, it's not the diminishment of other identities. It's not me failing to acknowledge that other identities exist. It's just that that's what we're talking about today. And you can spend more time with me in the future talking about other means of inclusion and right, how we can support other types of students at another time. But that's what we're talking about today. So I want to get started, and I don't want to make any assumptions about folks in this room or out of this room and their understanding, right, their baseline understanding. So we're going to talk about language very quickly. Starting with the term transgender. Transgender is an umbrella term for people whose gender identity expression or behavior is different from those typically associated with their assigned biological sex at birth. So something that I want to make clear is that transgender is a term that's okay to use by non-transgender people, right? One of my least favorite arguments that I hear for, right, the lack of political correctness, which I just call respect, right, is they just, those darn things, they just change so fast, right? How many of you have had a conversation or you've heard that language or you see it on the news, right? I don't want to get used to it. I'm not going to say anything because they just change so fast. So here's me actively telling you the term transgender is appropriate for non-transgender people to use. It is an umbrella term. All of these other identities that fall under that umbrella of transgender, including, right, third gender, intersex, two-spirit, transsexuals, male to female, right, all those additional identities, you may hear in one-to-one conversations through personal contact. If someone tells you their identity, go ahead and believe them, right? It's pretty simple. You go ahead and believe them. But as we talk about this topic generally, out of respect, transgender is an appropriate term to use, right? So there are major organizations, Human Rights Campaign, GLSEN, that have full-on, flat-out said that this is an appropriate term for folks to use when talking about this population, right, and serving their needs. So that first term is transgender. The other term that we're talking about is non-binary. So there are a couple of ways that we can identify non-binary. The other term that you'll hear me use throughout the presentation is gender non-conforming. And that's simply people whose gender is not exclusively male or female. So some transgender people will identify their gender as male to female. Some will say I'm a transgender male. Some will say I'm a transgender woman. Some will say I'm a transgender female. And again, you can just go ahead and believe them. But some folks, again, will share that their identity is gender fluid, gender non-conforming, or non-binary, and that means they don't fall on one side or the other, that we're looking at gender and their presentation of gender as a spectrum, right? So that's what we're talking about, is anyone whose gender expression or identity is not what we as a society have deemed to be typical, average, or again, on that binary of male or female. So you know you're an attorney when your pictures are just more words, right? I apologize in advance. I thought it would get better. It doesn't. This is what you came to. So the way that we're going to unpack and navigate this is we're going to talk about the policies that affect these experiences, and again, how you can effectuate them and how it affects you as an employee, as an educator, as a staff member who interfaces with students. So I'd like to begin again by just establishing these frameworks so you know what you're working with here at Springfield College, right? Starting with the gender-based misconduct policy and our notice of non-discrimination. These are two foundational pieces, right? These are absolutely essential in the experience of students, members of the LGBT community, all of our students, all of our faculty, all of our staff, but particularly gender non-conforming and transgender students. Transgender is not a protected class under federal law, which means students who experience or navigate their lives not on a binary have no federal protections against discrimination. Here at Springfield College, that's not good enough, right, in the sense of our community. So we have clearly defined sex discrimination to include sex based on someone's biology, someone's sexual orientation, which is their sexual attraction or lack thereof, and someone's gender expression or identity. That doesn't necessarily mean that someone's gender identity has to match, right? Their self-identity has to match what someone has perceived. So that's to say, if an effeminate man is being harassed and that man is heterosexual, he's still protected under our gender-based misconduct policy. We have a zero tolerance, right? Included in that is any misconception, or if you're being harassed on a hostile environment basis on the perception of not adhering to gender norms, that's also included. So our policy is incredibly expansive in that way. So when we make referrals to conduct here at Springfield College, that power is vested in our gender-based misconduct policy. And again, I apologize that the lawyer in me is like ready to go on this, and so you're not quite there. But the reason that this impacts you so significantly in a way that's different from other policies is that everyone in this room and everyone on the phone is a what? Responsible employee. Oh yeah, thanks housing, you're crushing it, right? So you have an obligation that is unique under this policy as opposed to all other institutional policies, and that you are a mandatory reporter, right? We use the term responsible employee. You sign off on that when you're hired at the college. You just actually recently re-signed off on that when you all completed your employee handbook, right, signatures. That was included in that. Every person in this room, on the phone, all of our community are deemed responsible employees, which means in that sense you become responsible for any type of misconduct, right? It's not just domestic violence or sexual assault. It's not just dating and domestic violence, right? It also includes sexual harassment on the basis of gender and gender identity or gender expression. That's not to say that it's our job to be community police, but it does mean that you are alleviated of the burden of tackling this issue independently, because we have a team of folks who are here to help and support you do that. When you file a complaint, right, based on that mandate to report, you then engage the Title IX team, right? You're introducing the Title IX team to that student. You're allowing us to connect that student with necessary resources. We can put safety measures in place and so on, right? So this is a very unique element of this policy. There are other policies here at the college that you're like, have to be here, but I have nothing to do with it, right? Every single person here at Springfield College interfaces with our gender-based misconduct policy. So when we talk about what you can do, again, it's understanding what your role as a responsible employee means and when that's triggered. So what I think is really important to talk about in this regard, especially with students who can be particularly vulnerable because of their identity, is I want to talk to you very briefly about the difference between a disclosure and sharing. Right? We spend a lot of time, again, it's one of the best things about Springfield College, caring for students, developing personal relationships. I think the personal relationships here at Springfield College in particular are one of the things that make it most special. Any student that I speak with has multiple faculty and staff members that they say, I had spoken to this person and they encouraged me to do this, or this was the first person I told to and they told me to come and talk to you, and I feel really comfortable, or do you mind if I bring X, Y, and Z to a meeting because they make me feel really comfortable. This is a really special place for that. So in regards to those personal relationships, we want to keep in mind the balance of what it means to be a responsible employee versus what it means to be a connection and a mentor, right? The mandate on reporting comes when that individual has experienced anything that falls under that blanket of discrimination, gender-based misconduct, again, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity. Those are essentially bullying type behaviors in addition to what we commonly talk about to be sexual assault or sexual violence and dating and domestic violence. If a student comes to you and expresses frustration or a concern or frustration with their family, right, that's within the bounds of sharing. But if someone says, my classmate won't stop calling me by my legal name and it's really getting to me and I'm having a hard time going to class, sharing or disclosure? Sounds like a disclosure, right? And that's a hard line. So something that I want to highlight, and on the back table with my very ugly, again, I'm an attorney, I apologize, right? There's not even a tablecloth on it. There's a document that actually outlines our investigative process that I would encourage you, all of you, to grab and take a look at. It's also available on the Title IX website. The reason that's so important is because it allows you to share with the student that you're working with the options they have. I want to make clear that when you report an incident of gender-based misconduct, that does not equate to an investigation. The last thing we want to do is make students who are uncomfortable or don't feel safe feel that their privacy is being invaded and that we're putting them in a position where they don't want to be. What a report does is it effectuates our process for getting students connected to services, whether on campus or off campus. We engage in safety planning, right? We engage in counseling, anger management, all these things that can be helpful and supportive. Some students may choose to initiate an investigation, but they're not the same thing. I know that faculty and staff, obviously again, citing back to your personal relationships that you have with students, may want to protect that student, and out of concern, some folks may be worried about reporting. So I just want to alleviate that a report does not equal an investigation. And so the more we can share that and make that clear, I think that's incredibly important. So knowing what your role is and knowing what your obligations are. The next piece I want to touch on is knowing that the college can institute interim measures, right? So moments ago, I said that students do not have to engage in the investigative process. If a student chooses not to engage in the investigative process, we still have the ability, working with the Dean of Students Office, Sue Allen also serves as a Deputy Title IX Coordinator, to institute interim remedies. That means we can do things like change student housing arrangements, or put no contact orders in place, or change a student's academic schedule so that they feel safe and secure without involving anyone else, right? The idea and the hope is that we can be there for our students at all times, that we have created an outstanding culture of inclusion and acceptance and safety, but we know that we can't make the assumption that that's true, right? So whatever we can do to help these students engage, whatever we can do to remove barriers from learning, that's what we're here to help do. So if a student doesn't feel safe, again, citing the example earlier, because their hall, for example, is engaging in bullying type behaviors, we can put that student in a new housing space by working with our folks in residential life, right? We work with chairs of academic departments, we work with a counseling center. So all these options are available. And again, when you speak to a student and you say, I just want to make sure that you understand I'm a mandatory reporter under the college's policy, so I have to let the Title IX team know, and again, we're the only folks who need to know, Sue Allen or myself. It doesn't mean you have to go any farther than that, right? That's something you can actively tell them with sheer confidence. And again, I'm going to plug for my table as well as the Title IX website. The last piece I really want to touch on again is to report and then refer. Again, you are not alone in this during your experience. It is not up to you to identify the resources for students in need. Again, one of the best things about Springfield College is I have no doubt that if a student came up to someone, anyone in this room, and said, I need this, that you would say, all right, let me find it, I'll figure it out. But know that you don't need to do that. For all of our PCS folks, as well as our main campus folks, if you visit the Springfield College Title IX website, we've made resource sheets for confidential and non-confidential resources for each of our campuses. So if you interact with any PCS students over the phone, so even if you're working with a student in Wilmington, you can refer them to that online website, and there's a Wilmington Title IX resource sheet that's made available to them. So we have those for all of our campuses, so please know that those exist. All right. The next policy that we're going to talk about is the name change policy. The name change policy allows students, faculty, and staff, it's used by any member of the campus community, to change their name used by the college. How original and well named, right? Name change policy changes your name. So what I want to highlight is that there are two types of name changes that are included in this policy. It's done all on the same form, and it's not a separate process. The first is a legal name change. So if a person were to get married, for example, or change their first name, the example that I always jump to is my dad. He was born Giuseppe Antonio, and now he's just Jay, right? A little less exciting, but he went through a legal name change process. So it happens for a various number of reasons. Whether folks are experiencing, we have adult adoption where we have students who are changing their last names. It happens for a number of reasons, and it happens all the time. The second is a preferred name. And just as you may guess, right, a preferred name is the name a person prefers to be called. It may or may not be given to you and reflected on your birth certificate. What I think is really important when we talk about preferred names is to set the expectation that a preferred name is not a nickname, right? A nickname is kind of optional. Nicknames we have in different settings, right? My name is Mary and my dad will call me Mare Bear or Barry, or, right, I grew up playing sports and all my friends would call me Mare, right? Dropping the Y makes it real casual, right? That's a nickname. Different people in different settings call me different things, right? That's a nickname. You do not refer to someone's preferred name who is a transgender, non-binary, or gender non-conforming student and say that their preferred name is a nickname, right? They are who they are in all areas of their life, and that's the difference. Mayor Bear doesn't come to work. Sometimes, right? It was cold today, maybe a little bit, right? But it's recognizing that there's a distinction and difference between those two, and so the way that we refer to those names really matters and is really important. So I want to spend some time talking about names. For folks who don't have a preferred name, you probably don't think about it that much, right? So there are legal limitations relative to data integrity, right, relative to security purposes, where a preferred name cannot be used. Things like social security cards, financial records that we maintain here at the college, even things like diplomas, right? Those are limited to legal names. But we can use preferred names on a lot of different things. So here are some of the spots where I was thinking about where I see and use names here at the college. Right? It's on my ID card, my email, my Pride Online login, it's on Brightspace, it's on my paycheck. If I had received a diploma from Springfield College, it would be there. It's on our students' transcripts. Sometimes it may be referenced on the website, right? If you go to the Title IX page, it's all over that. My medical and health records, it's on classroom rosters. Institutional communications, when I get a letter from Human Resources, it's on that, as well as anything that's involved in the safety or security process. So I want to spend some time really diving into why it's so important that we have a preferred name policy, and kind of what I thought was some shocking information. So to start, there are only 253 colleges in the United States that allow preferred names to be used. Is that surprising to anyone? That statistic is from the very end of 2017. That is one of the most recent surveys we have of that information. Of those 253, there are only 110 that allow students' preferred names to be displayed on their photo ID. So some people say, I don't get it. I don't understand the problem. You tell people your nickname, you move along, right? Like the day is done, easy as pie. But when we talk about transgender and gender non-conforming students, we have to talk about safety and security and the opportunities that not adhering to a preferred name presents for those students, right? We're going to talk about safety and security, and we're also going to talk about affirmation in the essence of humanity, right? We are an institution of humanics. We can't ignore the sheer humanity of being called by the name that makes you feel safe and comfortable. So when we talk about the limits of legal names, right, we can't use a preferred name on everything. I do think it's important to unpack why some students may not have a legal name change. Again, I don't want to make any assumptions that people know folks who have had this experience. In the United States, it's cited, the last census cited that only 4 out of 10 adults in America know a transgender person, which means 6 don't know or aren't intimately familiar with what this experience looks like. So I also want to appreciate and make space for the fact that you may have questions that come from a place of sincerity and respect. So if you already know these things, I'm happy that you can help coach others on this content. And if you don't, I want to make sure we're laying this groundwork. So when someone wants to make a legal name change, if they don't have the support of their family, you have to be at least 18 years old. So for many of our incoming students, it's not an option, right? So until they turn 18, they may not have the support or parental consent to make that legal name change. The other thing I want to highlight is that changing your name can be expensive. Here in Massachusetts, the filing fee alone, just to take out the formal paperwork, is $150. There's also an additional fee when you actually file the document. I filled up my gas tank in college $5 at a time, right? For an adult person saying, oh, it's a couple $100, you could just do that all in one day. But our students who are working work-study jobs or coming from socioeconomic status where they're sharing money with relatives, right, or siblings where they're responsible for their own food and bills, $150 just to get started is really, really significant, right? So that may also be another barrier to a legal name change. There was a study that was recently done by Campus Pride, and it found that 49% of transgender and non-binary college students were not out to at least one family member. 49% of the transgender and non-binary students that we will interface with may or may not be out with friends, right? May or may not be out on this campus, but 49% are not out to at least one family member. Reasons that students cited not sharing their experience or identity with their family members were believing their parents wouldn't get it or that they wouldn't take their identity seriously, that their parents hold and exhibit anti-LGBTQ attitudes, or that they are from a culture that does not tolerate LGBTQ identities and experiences. So again, when we think about students here at college forming their own identities as adults, we have to recognize that so many of our students are also immediately linked to their families at home, whether it's through financial needs, right? If I legally change my name and I share this identity, I might not have the financial means to continue my education or have housing, right? From your church, right? From your spiritual community that may lend your, other parts of wellness in your life and your sense of belonging and community, right? So there are all these other social barriers that exist where students may choose the preferred name policy while here at college until a later point in their life where they're either socially or financially able to make that change. So why is this such a big deal, right? How does this impact our students? So I want to talk about, I missed a slide. We'll just pretend. So what we're going to talk about, just while we're on this, is what happens when that policy is not respected, the process of misgendering and misnaming, and why that becomes so significant. So for those who don't know, again, not making any assumptions, misgendering or misnaming, that occurs when a person is called by a name or referenced in terms of pronouns that formed a maybe prior or previous identity, right? That they don't align with that person's identity as it is now, as they express themselves, as they hold it to be. It may be calling someone by their former name. So former name is a term that we use to describe the name the person was given before they selected a preferred name or their legally changed name. So if you are a transgender woman and you're being called by a man's name, you can just imagine the discomfort that might evoke. When we think about names, again, I want to challenge you to think personally about what your own name means, right? We don't think about that a lot. What does your name mean to you? Is it special? Right? Do you like to be called by your name in conversation? Maybe you share your name with someone special. My great-grandmother has mine, or I have her name, I should say, right? Mary Frances forever, right? Living on. Right? So names are highly personal. Look at, right, this list, all the places that these are. Where else are names? Marriage certificates, cards, right? Your name tag, what people call you, right? Your wait staff at a restaurant introduce themselves. Hi, I'm Mary, I'm your server, right? I'm from a family of people who are very aggressive to be affirming. Oh, thanks, Mary, we're happy you're here, right? Names are highly personal, and they're the thing that you use every single day, right? So when we think about misnaming someone or misgendering someone in that regards, it's highly personal and affects every area of that person's life. So, stark reality. When we talk about our preferred name policy, something that I want to bring to your attention and create a call to action is that we are not perfect. While I'm very proud to be one of those 110 institutions that allows for preferred names to appear on ID cards, the fact that we have a preferred name policy at all is a great foundation, but it's not perfect. Right? How many of you use a system in your department, a digital system in your department to keep information or store information? Okay, how many of you access on a regular basis student records? Right? How many of you have taught a class and have Brightspace? Perfect. Right? So we have, I'm thinking about just my daily life. I use Maxian, I use PrideNet, I use Brightspace, I interface with our AP portal, right? All these systems that we have in place. One of the problems is making sure that when a student or faculty member or staff member submits their preferred name is that we're actually using it and we have the infrastructure that supports that use. So if a student identifies their preferred name but it's not appearing on Brightspace, it's not in their email, it's not on the class roster that you call out, what are we doing to serve that student? Right? Another thing that I want to really highlight in terms of misnaming is students at Springfield College, again, may or may not be out as a transgender, gender non-conforming person here, which means when you call that person by a name that doesn't appear to match what a student sees, you've potentially outed that student for the first time, right? That carries significant safety and emotional consequences, right? That's not our information to own, it's our information to respect, right? But it's not our information to share. And so when we're talking about these expectations, just because you may notice that a student has a name in parentheses or a student has emailed you in advance asking to be called by a certain name. Again, that's your information to respect, but not your information to share, because we don't know the dynamic of students, right, relative to their peers, relative to their families, so we need to be mindful of that. So what I'm really asking from all of you is to evaluate, right, where are names seen in your role, right? When and how do you interact with names? Where are your names drawn from? Do you pull from legal name columns? Do you pull from admissions documentation? Do you pull from Brightspace, right? Is that where you're getting your roster? Think about that. Do you provide or create opportunities for preferred names to be shared? Do you ask people, do you have a preferred name? If you have a form or document that comes out of your office, do you have a space for a preferred name? Something to think about. When you're asking for someone's gender or sex, is it necessary? That's a good baseline, just to start. Right, you go to the library, I'd like to check out a book. What's your gender identity? That's a weird question, right? We don't all need to know, right? Do you actually need that information? Some of our departments are going to say yes. Some of our information pulls from our internal data system that requires a gender or sex in order to process that information through the student. So that's understanding. But are you mindful of what options we have? Many of our systems that we currently use, because of their age, only have male and female. If that's something you notice, bring it to our attention. Help us internally audit. Help us make that better. We're doing as much as we can. My primary focus, and just to share with you kind of how I'm working through this, is anything external is my #1 priority. Anything that is showcased when a student interacts with another person is what we're focusing on, to make sure that that student feels safe and comfortable navigating student life, right? And as we progress and as we get better and as we do this as a community, the object would be that all of our internal documentation and computer systems also align with that value of community. So if you see something and you have a question, hey, I noticed we ask for gender on this e-document, can we put an other? Can we put a fill in the blank? Right? Are these options that we have digitally? But we have so many different systems that we use between our departments that can be hard to track and hard to recognize where data is being pulled from. So again, thinking about where it's pulled from, what use and why you need it. Also thinking about, like I said, whether it's internal or external. Right, a lot of the documentation in financial aid, for example, is going to be internal. A lot of that is going to be legal documentation, right? Whether it's pay stubs or tuition bills, those are generally internal documents that the student is sharing maybe with parents, but maybe not. Versus if we're sending admissions paperwork, right, or other institutional communication. And then finally, how is information communicated digitally? Are you posting things on Brightspace? Are you sending things via email, etc.? So I challenge you all to really think about that and how you interface with those elements. And let us know if you see something that is not right or correct. And again, we're counting on this to be a community effort based on our community expectations. So again, things you can do. You can call me. Right? That's an option. When we're looking to effectuate our name change policy or our gender-based misconduct policy, you can give me a call. Something else I'm going to ask is that you be mindful of rosters. Right? When we're thinking about the name change policy specifically, how are you taking attendance, for example? Do you call out first names? Do you call out last names? Last names generally have a, right? They can't be gendered, they can't be misgendered. So could you start with last names and ask students to, in response, instead of saying here, give their preferred name? I'm going to call you out by last name when you respond. Just let me know what your preferred name is. Pretty easy, right? I didn't radically change the time that my course took, right? You go through the same process as if you were reading first names and you get corrections. How about pronouns? Professor Elizabeth Morgan recently circulated in conjunction with the Office of Inclusion and Community Engagement a preferred pronoun policy. Those can be included on your email. I know not everyone may be comfortable saying, hi, my name is Mary, and I use she, her pronouns. Some people are still trying to practice, some people are getting used to it. But if you feel comfortable putting it in your email, I would encourage you to do that for no other reason than that the only people who will really notice are the people that it's going to matter to. And what it tells those folks is that you're comfortable and open and receptive to a conversation about pronoun and name preferences. Right? The average student who navigates the world with their name matching their identity right? They're not going to notice pronoun she, her, hers at the bottom, but to the student that doesn't, that makes a really big difference. It's like laying out a welcome mat, right? Some people are going to notice, they're going to look down and be like, oh my God, is this from Target? It's so cute, right? And some people are going to just walk through the door, right? That's the reality. It affects the people who it deeply affects, right? It sends a very clear message. So I would encourage you to use it. Again, recognizing that we have to practice sharing our pronouns. It's not common everywhere. In some cultures, it's more common than others. Some of you may have experiences where you go to a conference, right? And people are really quick and easy to share their name and preferred pronouns. A lot of conferences now include preferred pronouns on name tags, right? When you facilitate programming, you have that decision, right? It's not excessive in time, right? It's, again, folks may choose not to share, but for the folks who it matters to, that makes a significant programming difference. Again, recognizing that misgendering and misnaming is a form of hostile environment harassment. And it's in red because I can't say it enough, right? It's not just bullying, it's not just being teased, it's not just a part of growing up, right? Hostile environment harassment is anything that creates a barrier. If a student of ours can't come to a club or a program or a spiritual service or a class because they don't feel safe in that space, there is a barrier to their learning and their participation in our community, and that's hostile environment harassment, and we'll address it through our Title IX policy. So if a student comes to you, again, the difference between sharing and disclosing, if a student discloses an incident of this type of behavior, know that conversations can be had. I also want to appreciate that there are different spectrums of understanding about this process, right, and how harmful it can be. I also want to appreciate that there are some folks who may transition while they're in college, and that active transition can be hard for people who knew students, you know, as a first-year student during pre-camp, and now as a senior, I'm relearning your name. I appreciate that process. I'm here as a resource, right? The student is available for you. Again, going back to the good job that we do at creating personal relationships. If that student didn't feel safe transitioning here, then I can guarantee you they wouldn't. Right? So if they're engaging that process here, we really need to take that as a sign of, you know, respect, and appreciate the fact that we've created a community where that's happening. But as far as misnaming, making sure that you check yourself, apologize if it happens, recognizing that it does happen. There are slips of tongue. Like I said, we have students who come in from the time they're in pre-camp through undergraduate and then make transition prior to returning here for grad school. Right? So recognizing that it does happen, but that it's not acceptable or appropriate. We really need to check ourselves if it does happen. If anyone in a management position or as a department chair or anyone in this room has any questions about what that looks like or needs support in having that conversation, I've had those conversations with employees about what misgendering and misnaming can do and how it affects students. We've done it reactively, we've done it in an attempt to be proactive, but know that that conversation is important because that type of behavior is sexual harassment. Again, and then finally, providing resources. And if you need some, please ask. We have books, we have websites, we have community organizations, we have handouts, we have flyers. We've done training with, and something I'm really proud to say is all of our student leadership, all of the peer leaders that interact with these folks have had training on names, preferred names, gender pronouns, and Title IX resources. So we have students who are on the ground looking to their peers, being able to share this information. We have folks in public safety who have been trained on Title IX. Our folks, right, our Title IX investigators have been put through the Safe Zone training here at the college. We've done a lot of training work and we're always happy to do more. So if you need more resources or more training, or you think that your department or floor or area or team or division, whatever, could benefit from more training, please let me know and I'm happy to help make something personal. Again, share your experiences where and when you feel comfortable. Share them maybe when you don't feel comfortable, right? Recognizing that students who are having this experience are taking much more significant risks than this. Right, again, I can't sing the praises enough of Calvin for really driving along with Professor Elizabeth Morgan our preferred name, right? Preferred name policy and the preferred pronouns piece that they've just shared. I want to spend some time talking about why this is important, right? A couple different pieces. Now, I say this pretty regularly. There's a affirming humanity in being called by the name and gender that you prefer, right? When you use the correct name and correct pronouns, right? That's affirming to someone's humanity at baseline. If you don't buy into that, and you might not, and I'm not here to tell you otherwise, the reality is it's our institutional policy. So at the end of the day, that's the rules, right? I don't want to sound like a parent, but, right, there are people who may not agree with this policy, but it's our rules, right? Respect is part of our rule, right? Non-discrimination practices are the law of the land here at Springfield College. We've been very clear about that. And the reason why this matters so much, particularly for this population, and these numbers are very striking, at least 74% of the known victims of anti-transgender violence in 2017-2018 were misgendered in initial police or media reports surrounding their death. Last year alone, 128 transgender folks were killed in hate crime violence. 83% of transgender youth surveyed said they felt hopeless or worthless in the last week. If we have transgender students, they are encompassed in that transgender youth number. That's 83%. 39% of transgender adults who also are members of our population, right? Surveyed said they currently experience serious psychological distress and manic episodes, which is nearly 8 times the rate in the United States general population. And finally, the one that I think hurts the most is that 4 out of 10 transgender adults report having attempted suicide, with the majority of those folks having done so before the age of 25. The normative populations that we work with here on our main campus, that's them, right? And again, when we look back at what I said before about why students may or may not choose to change their name legally, that becomes so significant when you think about the fact that students may not feel supported or loved or cared about at home, where they may recognize social or institutional barriers in the place where they're coming from, and they find Springfield College to be a safe haven. Right, by lending support of an adult person, by being a mentor, by showing that you care, you significantly change the trajectory of these young people's lives, right? And that's really powerful. And again, I'm not saying that my policies are better than some other policies here at the college, but this is pretty darn important and pretty darn impactful work, right? It's really great that you want to register your motor vehicle so you can park in Lot 4. That's a great policy to have. I'm going to say that there's some diminishing returns, right? When I look at gender-based misconduct and we do that right, that changes people's lives, and that's really radical. So I want to share again some more resources and more information that's available to you, highlighting one of our Pride Talks that's coming up on March 26th. We will have inclusivity in the classroom, why it is important, timely, and easier than you think, hosted by Chris Hakala and Elizabeth Morgan. We also have our Safe Zone training that's available for departments, divisions, and it's open to the entire campus. And that's hosted, or facilitated by Laurel Davis Delano as well as Elizabeth Morgan. And we also have an extensive Title IX team of folks who are available to support you in talking through issues, even if it's hypothetically, with students or coworkers that you have. And that includes myself, Sue Allen, again, as our Dean of Students, Michelle Lisa Sina, Jonathan Howell are both deputy coordinators that can be available to you as resources that can help make referrals of your students or coworkers to the correct folks. And they're intimately familiar with our process. So I do want to leave time for some questions that people may have. We have about 10 minutes left. If anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, yes.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm from admissions. I work with transfer students. And so my question is, when a student has identified to me, like in an email correspondence, getting them to try to get to fill out an application, they've identified to me that they have a preferred name, but I'm not supposed to share that information. So how do I make sure that it appears in our system in the ways that we can change it without telling on the student, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Absolutely, and that's a great question, and that's perfect because we have, as mentioned, our preferred name policy. So what I would ask is that when a student shares that via email, that you respond and attach our preferred name policy or name change policy form that they can complete. And if we catch students before they actually come to Springfield College, their name will be put in our data intake system, which then all our so, oh my goodness, you can tell I'm done with this. Right? All of our other systems pull from. So if we're able to put that preferred name in that first name template, then all of the other areas where that student will touch, including Brightspace, including other financial aid pieces, will pull from that. So as long as they fill out that preferred name document, you're not violating FERPA, and it'll immediately be processed by the college.
And is that form available on the website?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Where is it, through PrideNet or is it on your?
So it is on PrideNet. You can find it in the Human Resources page, but that may be something that you think about including on your admissions page.
Sure.
Right? That's a great way to start with self-evaluating our department. How can we be more inclusive? Oh, perfect. Here's information about our application. We use the Common App. On the Common App, you're allowed to identify other genders besides male and female. We're going to make sure that our preferred name policy is included right next to it. Boom, that'll take 10 seconds. We'll call over communications and marketing, and you just changed the experience for a lot of folks. That's a great thought.
Online, Arlinda's asking, how can we get safe zone signage?
Safe zone signage is only available to folks who have completed the safe zone training. So you can reach out to either Laurel Davis Delano or Elizabeth Morgan about safe zone training at your specific campus. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I have a question about the exit of students. So thinking about, because I have our pre-professional students, so in supporting them and seeking employment at places that have policies that are safe, so does Career Center help with finding, those places and spaces for them?
Yes. Yeah. So the question was.
And in fact, they won't say it, but I will say it. They won a national award for being recognized as LGBTQ friendly career centers a couple of years ago. And so I just want to throw that out to my colleagues over at the Career Center.
So I'm just going to try and capture that in the microphone for the folks who are watching online. So the initial question was for students who are exiting programs, how can we ensure that students are being connected with potential employers or opportunities that are safe in regards to being friendly to transgender and gender nonconforming students? The response was that our career centers do provide those services, and then the additive was to celebrate our peers in that our career center has won an award for being LGBTQ friendly in their support of LGBTQ students and connecting them with job sites and opportunities. I also want to make a plug for Career Center services, not just for students exiting, but for students who are being put on internship placements. They are protected under, again, Title IX, under our federal law and our state EEOC laws. If a student is put in a placement for an internship, regardless of what department or division they are coming from, they are protected under Title IX. So even if they are put out in a workplace that does not protect legally the rights of transgender persons, they are protected under our policy and under the state of Massachusetts. Right? So if we have a student who goes to Connecticut where they don't have an anti-discrimination law relative to transgender and gender nonconforming people, they still have a right preserved here at Springfield College. So that's really important to know. If you have a student who comes back for a one-on-one, for example, from a site or a placement, and they make these sort of complaints, come and talk to me in the Title IX office because we manage it through there. Again, Title IX is on the basis of discrimination, not just sexual assault, domestic violence, sexual harassment, but also on the basis of employment, on the basis of pay. Also, when we think about students who are being punished, right, or in their workspaces, let's say one of your interns is released from their internship opportunity and another student is put through training again or given a mentor, right, and those disciplines look different and you think there's a reason why, come and talk to me as well, right? All of those circumstances are protected under Title IX. Any other questions? Was this striking in anything relative to your department that you're like, oh, I want to look at this, or I'm concerned about this, or I'm excited about this? I feel like it's lunch, we're excited about lunch. Well, I just want to say again, thank you so much for everyone who's been involved. And again, I can't help but think, that this is such a proud moment that we've put out this type of program, and this is the response, and that you took time out of your day. You took off your lunch hour to come and learn about how you can be a better support to our students in our community. Again, I think it speaks volumes to the Springfield College mission and how we live out that mission all the time. So thank you again to everyone who came. I really appreciate it.